friends, welcome back to the Film Alchemist podcast, the show where we look at movies we love, break them apart, to find out what gives them their magic. I'm your host, Josh Griffey, joined again on the second half of this very special Friday night double feature by returning co-host and friend, Molly Henery. Welcome back.
Hey, thanks for having me back.
All right, guys, so this is a double feature. This is the second half. I hope you guys listened to Labyrinth and watched Labyrinth and loved it as much as we did. If not, go back and download that, find it as well. Just in case people didn't, Molly, would you like to reintroduce yourself, who you are, and where they can find your work?
Yes, I am Molly Henery. I am a film critic. I have my own website, thebloggingbanshee.com, where I review films, and then I also contribute to some other websites. Most recently, I have started writing for Fangoria's original online content.
Woo!
Yeah!
What a resume. What a resume.
Thanks.
And, Molly, very active on Twitter, for sure.
Yes.
At Blogging Banshee on Twitter. You can find her. We'll tag her as well. So make sure to follow. Lots of good stuff all the time. So Molly, I've loved following Molly on Twitter and reading her stuff for a while now. So we finally connected, and she was nice enough to come tonight. And the double feature she brought is absolutely amazing. So again, we did Labyrinth. Now it's time to talk about Dark Crystal. Perhaps one of the darkest kids movies of all time. It's not the light fantasy romp I remembered it as.
No.
All right, so Molly, I know you said Labyrinth was probably your favorite film of all time.
Correct.
I would say, honestly, it feels like these films are always lumped together, but they are such wildly different movies.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on Dark Crystal?
I mean, I love the Dark Crystal.
Mm-hmm.
I think I don't have as much of a connection to it, even though I probably saw it for the first time around the same time I saw Labyrinth.
Right.
And they are lumped together because they're both amazing Jim Henson films. But Labyrinth has more of the nostalgia factor for me. I watched it all the time as a kid. Whereas The Dark Crystal, I feel like it's a very, like you said, it's very dark. Like more along the lines of legend or never-ending story. And it's a very slow, ponderous film.
Yeah.
It takes, like, there's, even at the end, it's not like a ton of action or anything. And when you're a little kid, it's harder to get into.
Yeah.
This is more of a film that I appreciate more as an adult. Because I appreciate the storytelling and the artistry of it and the world building. Like, it's an entire planet that they built.
Yeah, I think that is the thing, because I always forget about the sci-fi element as well, right?
Mm-hmm,
the beautiful kind of naturalist fairy tale they build, and the world, again, we only see very small parts, but you feel like it's this very expansive, enormous journey we go on. And I think part of it is just because a lot of times we're just slowly drifting down a river. We're slowly walking with the mystics in these beautiful, lush settings. So you feel like you've experienced a lot more of the world than you really do, right? I think the thing this movie doesn't have that Labyrinth has, right? Besides David Bowie, which would make this, if he was the king of the Skeksis, this movie's immediately better by 2 stars. No. But I think this is the weirdest part, too, is I don't know why they made the Geflings humanoid, if that makes sense.
Okay.
I think they're a little too normal of face, right? I think it's the one thing in both of these movies. And Labyrinth is beautiful and opulent and very, out there. But I think Dark Crystal, the creature design is so much better to me, right? Like, I'm way more fascinated by the world and the creatures. And for some reason, the Geflings just feel very bland to me, right? Like, I love their journey together and their kind of, like, earnest emotional journey. But they're the one thing in both of these movies when I see that I kind of go, eh.
Yeah, they definitely are, compared to us, they're very bland because they look like us.
Yeah, right?
But I almost feel like maybe they did that because it's meant for kids. And it's hard, like, kids aren't going to relate as well to strange creatures as they would things that look more like
Right.
little kids. Because
Well, like, I
they're
wonder,
little
like,
like little
what if
kids.
they had done this as an alternate history movie, like Planet of the Apes, right? Like, we
Yeah,
could have had, like, Macaulay Culkin, right? Instead of the
exactly.
I don't know, but I was really keyed in on this time with, like, Labyrinth. I was like, just how much I felt like I was Sarah in that movie, even though she's this teenage girl, right? I'm this old guy. Like, it really, like, brings you right into the core of that journey with her.
Yeah.
And this one, I think it's what you said earlier, right? Is it's kind of this is really like a come way back and view it, right? I always heard someone describe like movie theater habits, right? Is there's formalist and realist, right? Are you the guy that runs to the front of the theater because you don't want to be able to see it all and the spaceships are flying around you and it's so fucking loud that you feel like you're in it? Or do you want to sit way back and look at it as like this total piece of art, you know, and see every detail? And I think Dark Crystal kind of brings out that, you know, kind of formalist in all of us, right? Where, again, I think it's, yeah, you're sitting there immersed in this beauty, but I don't know that you ever get as immersed in the journey.
Yeah, I think it's more, it focuses a bit more on the world building than
Yes.
it does. Like I never really feel connected to Jen or Kira the
Right.
way I do. And it's, I mean, it could be because they're not human. It's because they're weird little gelfling creatures.
Yeah, right.
But at the same time, I mean, we connect to non-human things in like Star Wars and
For
stuff.
sure.
So I think there's something about the way the story's told. And I think it could also be because they're way more, the gelflings are very altruistic.
Yeah.
And it's harder for us as flawed humans to really connect with
Yeah.
these beings who are so innocent, and it's probably easier for kids to connect with them than adults.
You know, that's a good point, man, because that's probably what kids feel like a lot, because you're watching it as an adult, or at least I am. And you're like, I want the fucking wrath. You know, like I look at the skek. It kind of reminds me a lot. Like, I have this experience a lot now. Like, as you get older, you look out at the world and you're just like, I don't understand this place. Like, what the fuck is happening?
Yeah.
Right? And like, you want vengeance all the time. You're like, I want bad people to have to pay for it so things make sense. And I think another probably reason that the Geflings are portrayed as they are is they're just these forgotten people in this world, right? So to have them be these very, you know, Legolas like defined heroic uber people doesn't really make sense to where they are. I think one of the beautiful things about the movie is how much I want to be in the world without that real emotional connection, right? And you're just looking at these two orphans, right? That, you know, we start off in the Dark Crystal. It's this epic monologue about darkness and evil and the Skeksis, and, you know, it's metal as shit. And then we just pan out and you're like, hey, man, they're just these two fucking orphans. Then they're in this really nice corner of the world where you're like, they're just doing the best they can.
Yeah.
You know, and there's something kind of poetic about the Geflings like that then once they're thrown into the fire of this journey, I don't know, maybe that's the thing. Maybe that it's harder because you don't want to bond with them because you're like, they're so weak and vulnerable. Like, I don't want to see them get destroyed.
You know, it's funny when you put it that way, it makes me think of like the hobbits in Lord of the Rings. Like, it's very much like that too.
But yeah, like they don't give him the orc sword, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, he's just out there. Like, they literally, the guy's just like, I'm dying, go on a mission. And he's like, all right, like, you've never lied to me before in this idyllic world. And like, he just goes.
And and there's something, I think that's something that that for me is a bit harder to connect to, because I feel like this story feels very almost faith-based. And I've never been someone who has been religious at all or anything like that. So it's harder for me to be like, to think of something that would make me think I would blindly go on some kind of quest for something that I believe in. I mean, that sounds awful that I don't believe in anything, but
to be fair, most of us really believe in nothing.
Because I feel like that's almost the equivalent of a religious leader saying like, you need to do this to save humanity or whatever, and go on this quest, and just automatically being like, yes, you are the leader. I believe that you are tapped into this power and you know what's going on, so I'm going to do it.
Right. Yeah. You know, it's so funny that really I never latched on to the religious part of it, but now that you say it, like, it's everywhere in the film. right? Like one of the weird moments in the movie that I was so confused by and almost mad about is I was like, why is the Dark Crystal ratting Jin out? Right? As soon as he starts his journey, it's like, boop, 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 boop. Like, newsflash, hey, Skeksis, here's the guy you need to go murder. And you're like, what the fuck, Dark Crystal? You really are bad to your core. But if you think about it as this kind of, it struck me as kind of this fate story, right? Where it's, what I think was really stunning to me about this time is, I think the older I get, the more I focus on the Skeksis, right? Is I was watching, I was just like, man, like I really spent a lot of time in the movie. I mean, I think that's one of the nice things about the movies. It lets you ponder, right? There's room to breathe. So as you get lulled into these like hypnotic, like, oh, look at those orange tentacle things. And you're lured in by the journey. You have time to stop and think. And the thing that just like was smacking me in the face constantly is, what are the Skeksis fighting for?
Yeah.
Like, why the fuck are they so desperate to just live this life?
Yeah, like it doesn't seem like they're living a great life, but do they even really, I mean, I just literally watched the movie today.
This happens to me all the time.
Did they even really say, other than like they would have complete power and control? Like, what does that mean?
Well, yeah, and the strange thing is that kind of gets to a religious theory too, right? Is that if they have control, they will just continue to bleed everything out, right? To me, if they win, everything just dies, right? There's no win, because that's, you watch them and the scene when they undress the Chamberlain.
Yeah.
And again, I was watching it with my kids because I'm like, come watch these movies from my childhood. And you're like, oh, fuck, like they're not ready for this. Like, you know, they watch like pretty safe, like kids movies today are very safe for the most part. Right? Like the scariest thing now is if you watch kids movies, they always kill a parent, right? Yeah. It's like all my kids' favorite movie. It's like your dad's dead, your mom's dead, you know, and you're just going to play with something. And it's like, fuck, all right. But for the kids, it's mostly safe. But I think we were all kind of, and like they were scared by the sword fight, right? But you see this there, and I think the scene when the emperor's dying, right? They're like, he's dying. We have to crown another. There's only 10 of them. And it's just these fucking things, these twisted, horrible birds in these kind of pompous, absurd uniforms. Yeah. Right? Puffing themselves up. And they're just watching, waiting for this fucking thing to die. This little fucking decrepit, tiny, disgusting bird. And the only thing he can say is, I'm still emperor. And then he dies and just turns into fucking dust.
Yeah. And probably the only thing that was keeping him alive was his desire to be in control of everyone else.
Yeah, man. It really struck me, because one thing I had totally forgotten in the movie is how one Skeksis is bonded to one of the mystics. And so I think that's something that really meant a lot to me today, was watching that when you cut to this very Yoda-like death of the mystic, who's kind of like in a blanket and everyone's chilling and he has his friend with him. And he just like quietly disappears, right? He's not like crumbling in upon himself. And so when they're like, oh, Skeksis rule is like, we're going to fucking fight for it, right? We're all going to fight to take power. And it's just, it really struck me as so disgusting today. You know what I mean? Like, it's just, and I think that's really a cool part of the movie, right? Like, I like that they're not, because like you said, it's like, what does it mean if they rule?
Yeah.
Like, what are they fucking ruling? This one little stupid castle in the middle of a desert.
Yeah, and it's funny how it's Jim Henson and Frank Oz directed this one as well. It's really interesting to watch how they really try to do everything to make kids and adults hate the Skeksis, because obviously they're hideous creatures. Yeah. They have these weird opulent outfits and again, kind of Victorian, kind of like we saw with the crystal ballroom or whatever in Labyrinth. They have slaves. They suck the essence out of their slaves. Even the way they eat, like when they show them eating and it's just like,
yeah. And he's just cramming food in his face. He's like, this is gross and rotten. It's like, again, it's like the platform. I had that same where I've come to realize like gross eating is the worst thing in movies.
Yeah, it's awful. And I mean, if they were to rule, it would essentially just be them probably expanding and destroying more. Like they already killed off all of the Gelflings. Eventually they'd probably kill off all the Poddlings too. Yeah. And so on until there was nothing left.
Yeah, and that's the thing. They never talk about this is our plan. You know, most movies like this, there would be the, once I do this, I can raise an army. I can bring back Skeksis we've lost, right? Like zombie Skeksis or whatever. If you want to get really nightmare inducing, there's no plan of that, right? The guy just takes power. He's like, this is my shit now. Like, I'm the king. Bow to me. And that's it, man. And even the fact that when the Chamberlain loses, they fucking just chuck him out.
Yeah.
I'm like, there's only fucking 9 of you left. You've been together for 1,000 years, and you're just like, get the fuck out of here. Like, it's so cruel and heartless. You know?
It's funny too. I was just thinking how you mentioned like the juxtaposition, how it shows how what the Emperor dies versus how the leader of the Mystics dies, and how different that is. Even when, I think Jen like scratches.
He stabs the Chamberlain with the shard.
Chamberlain's hand, and his hand bleeds, and he screeches like, "My hand!" And then they show the Mystic, and he just kind of looks at him. He's like, "My hand!" Like, just like, say, look, there's my hand.
Those like, Mystics were growing something out there for all these years. Well, there's the one scene when the kind of slaver, right, the slaver mad scientist Skeksis gets thrown down the fucking walls. He's falling into the abyss, and they cut to the Mystics, and one guy just poof, like explodes in a fireball.
Okay, continue.
The guy in the front never breaks pace. He's just, well, we're pretty slow. We got a long fucking one. But even that, right? I was struck by the Mystics. I'm like, this is the slowest ticking clock in the history of movies, right? Like, they're just slow. There is this predetermination in the movie, which I feel like would be a detriment to most movies, which never bothered me at all in this one, right? That they send Jen just because, and he'll make it because they never once stop with the Mystics and be like, what if he does? The panic scene, right? What if he doesn't make it? What if he needs more help? They just send him on an errand like it's nothing. Just tell him right where the crystal is, right? He doesn't have to really journey for it. You know, he just plays the flute and he has his thing, and they just believe that he'll be there when they do this long walk.
Which, it's also funny to me because now that we're talking about it, I realize how crazy it is that Jen left before they did.
Yeah.
Yet they get there like almost at the same time. Like, why didn't you guys just bring him with you?
Oh man, there are like movie editing things that drive me nuts sometimes. Like I remember when Argo came out and everyone's like, Argo's the best movie. And I was like, yeah, but the airport scene, the way they edit it, right? It just fucking drives me nuts. You're like, he said 5 minutes and this is like 30 minutes of movie, right? Like, I know you're trying to make me tense, but like weird clock things that don't need to exist at all just drive me fucking insane. Like, just stop saying numbers and just say, we got to go fast. Like, don't tell me a number that's impossible, right?
My only rationalization that I can think of is that he had to stop at Agra's to get the crystal.
Yeah.
And maybe that was
might have been
in
a
different
sidetrack
direction. Like, because that seems like it involved more hiking, and that might be a little hard for the Mystics.
And also, they're not going to be able to escape a burning building. Like, there's no way.
They move at a literal snail's pace. Yeah. So that's
it's also kind of funny, man, because this just dawned on me. But I was like, oh my God, are the Mystics using the Gelflings similar to the Skeksis? Like, hey, go on like this fucking hardcore journey for us? Like, one of them couldn't have done that in 1,000 years, but like, hey, we should just have that for when it's time.
Yeah.
Because they're protected. The creatures cannot kill them.
I think they, like the Skeksis, are very into prophecies.
Yeah.
And they're like, this prophecy says a fucking Gelfling is going to do this. He's going to find the crystal. He's going to fix the crystal or not if the prophecy fails. But that, like, it's either one or the other. So because I'm sure at some point, realistically, they could have gone to Agra themselves, got the crystal, and fixed it. Like,
because
but it had to be this exact
the Skeksis
moment.
Cannot attack them.
Yeah.
If the Skeksis attack them, they will die, right?
But for some reason, it has to be a Gelfling at that exact moment when everything is aligned, and
it's so strange because again, everything we're saying in that vein, you're like, my initial reaction is I want to be pissed because you're telling me that the journey of the character is not as heroic and doesn't matter. But this movie really does a great job of sidestepping that hurdle. Mm-hmm. You know, in most movies, that would be an enormous flaw in the movie, right? Like if in Speed, they could just hit the brakes. You know what I mean? Like Speed doesn't work anymore. Like you have to have it be a really hard journey.
Yeah.
And I think that what they do so well is they really sit and bond us to these kind of bigger ideas, like you're saying, right? Like the one scene that was absolutely gut-wrenching is when you realize that they're both for the first time realizing their families were only murdered because of the prophecy they're on their way to fulfill. just in that temple. And when the Chamberlain comes in, he's like, hey, just, work with me, find peace. And you see Jin so much just being like, yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Right? Right after he's taken in this horrific knowledge. And then you see it set in on him, and they run in this kind of fear for the moment.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just, I think that's what the movie does, is it builds these lush, beautiful worlds, right? Like unbelievable matte paintings, and the set, like Aughra's, house, her crib is unbelievable. It's one of the coolest sets I've ever seen in a movie. And when they're playing and writing on the planets, unbelievable, right? But what they do is, this is like I was not prepared for, turning on for my kids, is every fucking step on this kind of beautiful half of the journey, right? On the other side of the planet or wherever, where the good stuff is, every fucking stop ends in tragedy.
Yeah.
Like way more tragedy than I remembered or was prepared for.
I think that also might be part of why Jen had to go on that journey, because it seemed, especially when he meets up with Kira, it seems very much like because he was raised by the Mystics, he led a very sheltered life.
Oh, yeah.
And like how you said, when he first like learns about the prophecy and about the truth behind everything, and then the Chamberlain is like, no, let's team up. And he at first is like, okay, cool.
Yeah.
It's because he had never like firsthand experienced the tragedy that Kira had.
Yeah.
Not only with seeing her parents die, but then like her Poddling family being attacked and stuff repeatedly by the Skeksis and stuff.
Oh my God, yeah.
So he needed that to kind of grow up a bit. Like it's a hero journey and a coming of age story all in one.
Yeah, and I mean, that really plays with the religious theory too, right? Is that like, just imagine someone's like, hey, it's all going to be okay. And then one day you're just like, oh, fuck, dude, it's not okay.
Yeah.
Like you tell me there's this finish line where it'll be good, but you're like, Aughra's awesome house just got burned down. I don't know if she's dead. Yeah. These, Poddlings are being enslaved. And we're just assuming that none of them get killed there, right? But that we see families of Poddlings in this whole community. Yeah. And these giant, and this is like the coolest thing in the movie, those giant fucking monster crabs, right? The Githrums, something like that.
I can't remember what they're called.
Yeah, I actually wrote it down because I was like, don't forget, and then I forgot. I knew I would. But anyways, the giant crab, right? Like, you just watch these fucking nightmarish horrors, and the way they pulled that off is unfucking believable. They're some of the coolest monsters ever in a movie, right? Yeah. But you're just watching them, and it hit me how fucking extra scary it is that they're not just like Hulk raging and smashing Poddlings around. They're putting them in a fucking basket.
Yeah.
Oh my God. It's the kind of brutality you just don't experience anymore in these kind of movies. And then, so you pair that, right, with the slaves we've already seen, with the, hey, we're going to take your fucking life essence away. When you see that Poddling's face start to melt, is fucking brutal to watch. Yeah.
Like, see everything just get sunk in. And also, that's a really cool effect that they did.
Amazing. Yeah.
Like, just to see the eyes glaze over and turn purple and all the skin just kind of shrivel up and suck in. Ugh.
But the movie never misses a beat to add tragedy, right? Because what do we see right after that is the guy takes a sip, right? And he's like, oh, look at my hair. He's like looking at himself in this blurry reflection. And then we realize it didn't even work. Yeah. And he fucking throws the rest of that Poddling's life essence on the ground.
So just did it for nothing.
Just nothing. So this thing is just a fucking hollowed out husk of a creature with no family, no village, and will just be a slave for absolutely nothing. He has no joy in the fact, he's not even enjoying that he stole the essence. And it's just like, I could not square this time around the unrelenting sadness of this movie.
Yeah. Like, the Skeksis are really just the epitome of all evil. Like,
oh my God, yeah.
Like, and it's funny because, like, when people think of horrible evils, you think of, like, Lord Voldemort and stuff like that. And it's, I feel like there's something about the pettiness of the Skeksis that almost makes them worse than virtually any other villain.
Almost any ever.
They don't have a reason for doing it. They're not doing it because they think they're they probably do think they're a superior race, but
sure. But they don't think that they're helping by being superior.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Like they don't think they're bettering the world in their own twisted way. They just want the power, and they want to have control over everyone and everything, and to be able, and everything is dispensable to them.
Yeah. And all of that just to live in the fucking shittiest place we've ever seen it. Like, there's no, like, recreational room. There's no, like, look at this. This, like, oh, there's, like, a comfy place for them to lay. Like, it just looks terrible. It looks fucking terrible. And, but I was trying to think. I was like, man, like, even Satan, right? Like, Satan just got jealous. Like, that makes sense. We can all understand jealousy, right? Like, we get that. He was, like, the most beloved, and it still wasn't enough, right?
Yeah.
All right, I get that. Like Jason, you know? Oh, well, he saw his mom die and he's a zombie now because he got killed. Like Jason is relatable, right?
Yeah.
Like even in It, they try to make Pennywise like, well, you know, he got stuck here. Like he didn't want to be here either, right? And he's hungry. Like all these characters have something.
I don't even think of him as that evil compared to the Skeksis.
The Skeksis, I'm telling you off the top of my head, I'm like, they have to be, because even like serial killers and this and that, there is some kind of mental defect, right? Like, you get, I don't know, maybe I'm not obviously smart enough to comment on anything medical or psychological. I just know from the stuff that I have imbibed, it feels like people always say that there's some kind of genetic betting that has to exist, right? Mm-hmm. And then whatever triggers it, that's how you get a psychopath. So even that, you're like, there's a built-in flaw that makes them relate. The Skeksis, we don't necessarily know how they got there and why this started 1,000 years ago. But there is not one fucking scene of redemption. Yeah. And they set it up like the Chamberlain's going to be the, oh, you know, you shouldn't have fucking smacked him around and betrayed him. Now he's going to bring you down. He's still only in it because he wants to be back in the fucking club. Mm-hmm. It's like every
he wants that
scene.
Power.
Yeah, and you almost get the point. Like, here is something that really kind of stopped me in my tracks is you get the sense that Agra would have betrayed the Geflings as well.
I feel like she's a bit more of a neutral party in everything.
Well, that's what I mean, though, is like you're so desperate for her to not be neutral, right? She's like the guiding soothsayer. And she's just like, if you wanted Geflings, why didn't you just ask me? And I was like, oh, my God. I was like, she had a price, too. You're just like, everyone is a piece of shit in this world.
And I almost feel like that. I don't know how to put this. The Ponder's journey and the way that the Skeksis are only portrayed as these horrible, evil things might be one of the reasons why I'm sure a ton of purist listeners are going to be pissed at me for saying this, and people that don't even know who I am are going to hate me.
They're going to at you.
But I actually prefer the new Dark Crystal Age of Resistance miniseries. Partly because they expand on the world a lot. Yeah. Like, and we get more of the backstory, so we kind of understand a bit more about how it even got to this point that's in the film.
Well, you definitely latch on to the various Geflings way more. Yeah. Right? Like, they actually have a stake in this.
And like the character development is so different, and it's like I keep wanting to be like, when the fuck is season 2 coming out? Come on, guys.
Yeah, right.
I know we're under quarantine now, but come on.
No, we saw on Twitter this week, people love when you say sequels are better than the original. Yes. People are very understanding about things like that. No, I mean, if I'm being 100% honest, I'm with you. I think the series is just, and I don't think that's a bad thing. People get really bent out of shape about stuff like this. But to me, the way I look at it, right, is that the Dark Crystal miniseries couldn't exist without that awesome movie and us loving it that much, right?
Exactly.
And so what they did, and they went back, and I know last show Labyrinth, I was like, they'll never make a movie like that. Well, they made a show like it. They built things. They built real sets and used the puppeteers again. So, you know.
And that's why it's so amazing.
Yeah. It really plays, to me, and I don't think it's like you have to do either ors. I hate that about fandoms. To me, it's just this really great love letter to this thing we like. And they're like, hey, we all love that thing. But, you know, there's a lot of unexplored stuff. And they take, you know, they give us more time to sit. And that's the thing, you know, if you're doing a miniseries, that's part of it is you're going to journey more. And this movie itself is a really kind of slow thinking journey. It's a thoughtful journey. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, I'm with you. I actually think it's better.
And it's like loving the series and thinking it's amazing doesn't take away from how amazing the film is.
No, that's like one of those stupid, I don't know about your Twitter, but mine has only become, hey, pick one thing, and that means you hate other things. Right? So every day I get on Twitter, and it's 4 movies, only one. And I'm like, all right, it's fun as an experiment, but then when I pick, I always get someone messaging me being like, really?
Oh,
like,
yeah.
Yeah, I'm picking my movie, motherfucker. Like, you can pick yours. And also, like, just because I pick, Hellraiser doesn't mean I don't like The Exorcist and Halloween and shit. Like,
Yeah,
that's
exactly.
just my flavor, man.
Yeah.
And I think that I think that series, to me, I was shocked at how much care they took to make it a perfect bonded art piece to the movie.
Yeah. And I love that. I mean, I think there are a few minor exceptions that like practically would have been impossible to do.
Yeah.
But I love that they stayed true to Jim Henson's puppeteering, and like it's so crazy how they were able to. I mean, I guess it makes sense because when I watch the show, I'm like, wow, this world is so much more beautiful looking than the one in the film.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, we're seeing the film is at a point when the Skeksis have already taken over everything.
Oh, yeah.
And they've made it ugly with war and with their evilness. And so we're seeing it when it's still like a pristine world now in the series. So it's two very different worlds. So it makes sense that it would be more vibrant and beautiful.
Yeah, for sure. And I was really impressed at how, I think it was one of the cool, ponderous moments for me is how much beauty was still in this world. Because there is this weird disconnect between this all-powerful parasitic alien species, right, in this castle. Like, when you watch Aliens, the xenomorphs are never going to stop eating. They're not just going to, like, sit in the castle and be like, I bet there's no prey over there. Right? You know what I mean? Like, they're constantly on the hunt. And the Skeksis, to be fair, are just a version of that, right? They're these predatory creatures. And it is strange to me. Like, so over 1,000 years, at a point, they just stopped hunting. So and I think that's what's cool, though, is on some level, they're telling us that even they know how useless their existence is. And how hopeless even being selfish and evil is. And so while we're watching these just disgusting fucking creatures, we're also seeing that, there are these little societies and hopeful, like, decent spots. I think it's kind of cool because if at the end of the movie, it would make sense, right? To, like, a writer, it would imagine. Or a director would be like, oh, everything's a wasteland, right? Like, we're living in bunkers and, like the Mad Max Geflings instead of the ones they get now. But I think it's really kind of cool and important to the movie that we still like that little scene when they're just kind of cruising down the river, and they have like these really nice moments where they're just kind of sitting together and just enjoying company, being spiritually bonded, right? And I think that was a really cool part of the movie, is that there was still some parts of the world that are good.
Yeah. And even just when shortly after Jen leaves, and you get that panning shot where they just show all the different wildlife and the different plant life and stuff, like just something as simple as that shows that the entire world hasn't been affected, even though there's like no more gelflings and stuff, and societies have been affected, but there are parts of nature that are still the way the world used to be.
Yeah. I mean, no matter what they do, they can never snuff out. And that's something, I think she said that, Agra said that, right? Is that creation can be good and bad, right? Like it's kind of a mixed bag. And I think that's the thing in the world, because it plays as this kind of very melodramatic fable, right? Good and evil on a collision course. And then the movie starts and it's like, well, it's all pretty predetermined, right?
Yeah.
But you're still going to ponder and float. And I think that is why it works, even though you pretty much, this is one of those movies, you pretty much know exactly what's happening all the time. But I think they find ways through these really human moments. It's funny because I started this podcast by bitching about the Geflings not being relatable enough. But there's a shocking amount of really human moments, right? Both good and tragic. So, I mean, the movie is a lot of tragedy, but you have to have those kind of nice human moments, right? And like at the end, would he even jump on that crystal if he hadn't seen Kira?
Yeah.
If he had never found her and had this, really fast, like, oh, I found something worth living for finally. Would he jump on that crystal? Would he even want to go into that castle? Would he have stopped somewhere along the way?
Yeah.
Like, would he have seen the tragedies of the Poddling village and be like, man, fuck this?
Which is probably why it was important for him to go on that journey by himself, separate from the mystics.
Yeah.
And I think it's interesting. I think even though we knew inevitably where the story was going to go, I like that they still managed to make it a bit of a surprise when the crystal is fixed,
Yeah.
And we saw that, like, because we knew the Skeksis and the Mystics were connected, but we didn't know that they were technically the same being
Yeah.
that separated because the crystal was broken.
Yeah.
Because I don't think that was something that any of them knew. Like, because even Augur was like, yeah, one day the two species just appeared 1,000 years
Yeah.
ago when the crystal broke. We don't know where they came from or
And
what
his
they
vision
are.
of it was a Skeksis hitting the crystal, right? And we were led to believe that that's what happened. But then at the end,
Was
you're
it?
like,
I don't
yeah,
remember.
because he sees some flash where it's like, and he smashes the crystal, and almost as if we're led to believe, oh, that's what happened. But
Oh,
then we
okay.
learn later it's not, that
Yeah.
I think what you said is really good, right? Is that even though you know what's coming, they still do find little ways to surprise us, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like a moment I thought of a lot was when he gets locked in the basement, right, with the giant crab things again. And
Oh, yeah.
they're just emerging from the darkness, and it's awesome.
Yeah.
And you're like, all right, so in this predetermined way, they built these machines to kill Geflings, right, to save them from the prophecy. Those fucking things are the one that smashed the wall open so he can escape. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
It's like they created their. It's that you find your destiny on the path you take to avoid it kind of thing. And I think they have so many of those great moments. Like you were talking about that final scene. I mean, what an unexpected way to play that.
Yeah.
Like I kind of thought, I'm like, oh, these guys are going to do some like four-armed Master Splinter stuff. They're going to come in and whoop some Skeksis' ass. You know what I mean?
They're going to be like Yoda, where he seems really slow and frail, but really he can kick
We've
everyone's
been carb loading and saving ourselves for battle. Yeah, and then they just walk to their places like nothing's happening around them.
Yeah.
Like they're not worried about the shit falling on them. They're just, hey, we're here. And that moment also, this is my favorite part of the movie that I also kind of forgotten about, is when Jin finally dunks the thing, and it's not this immediate eureka moment, right? So as all this pandemonium's happening, the monsters are falling apart, the Skeksis are running around like, ah! His eyes never leave Kira.
Mm-hmm.
And he just walks over and he holds her. And he's kind of sitting there watching this fucking enormous, elaborate display of what is happening, right? Like just days ago, he was like, I'm just like a helper guy at like a farm ranch. And now, like, look at what's happening. And it's not worth it to him.
Mm-hmm.
He saved the day technically because he was supposed to, but he lost his only thing, man.
Yeah.
And him holding her, I was like, I got real teary-eyed in that moment. I was like, fuck, that's such a great way to play that final scene. And I think that's the cool thing about this movie is it feels like one of those movies where they always could have and probably were pushed to make the other decision.
Yeah.
Because for kids, like you said, it should be more swashbuckling and, harder along the way. But there's just these real, I mean, it kind of played, it had a like 1917 vibe to me today. You know what I mean? Where it's just him kind of along the way, just seeing these terrible realities.
Yeah.
And I was like, that's really fucking crazy way to make a kid's movie.
Yeah, I mean, and that's kind of what growing up is. It's not like as kids we went on these grand adventures and like fought things and stuff. We just went along, and along the way we saw some crazy shit that altered the way we think.
Yeah, man.
So it makes sense that would be his journey as well.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's just beautiful, man. But I mean, I guess there is a lot of action still. I'm sitting here acting like there's none. I mean, they literally throw a dog down the well and then stab his girlfriend. So it's still hardcore.
But they save it all for that end part.
Yeah. I mean, there. I had this the other day on I can't remember what show we were doing. Oh yeah, it was Henery, Portrait of a Serial Killer.
Oh.
And I was like, every time I watch that movie, which is probably more than I should, I'm fascinated by that film. But every fucking time, and my co-host Alex was just laughing in my face. I'm like, every time I watch it, I still hold out a flicker of hope that he's not going to fucking put her in that suitcase.
Oh, yeah.
Like, every time, like, there's going to be the happy ending where Henry realizes he has love and he doesn't have to kill anymore. And every time I see that suitcase, I get extra irrationally mad, right? And this movie has that effect on me where there are endings are coming, but, like, you're still worried. Yeah. And every time I watch, I'm like, if those motherfuckers don't revive her, I swear to God. Like, I was sitting there like, I know it's coming, but I'm still kind of holding my breath and getting, like, all worked up.
Which is so funny because I'm the kind of person where, like, I associate the Gelflings more as human than anything. So this still applies to them, where it's like, I don't care if people die, but if one of the animals dies, I'm so mad. So when
Dude.
Fizzgig gets thrown down there, I'm like, if you don't fucking rescue that little fur ball, I'm gonna be so mad. And when the land striders get killed,
Oh,
that
that was
wrecks me.
that was brutal. The one that fell off the cliffs, you're like, dude, you just like co-opted them for a run.
Mm-hmm.
Oh man, and
And
it
it's
felt
like
like
when
those
the one
Gefflings
like
in the
falls
basket
down and
didn't
they
get
all
away. Like those
what?
people, those Gefflings in the basket were just gonna get picked back up.
Oh, you mean the podlings?
The Poddlings, what the Geffling? Yeah, the Poddlings. So you're like, it feels so useless.
Yeah.
Oh, but that's what I mean is like the amount of suffering that is just anyone who gets in the path of this thing.
Yeah.
Oh man, it's really. I'm with you. I actually, I watched Audition the other day.
Okay.
So like I remember loving that movie. You're like, I haven't done this in a while. Awesome film, way stranger than I remember, and that's like my vibe now. But when I saw that dog, I almost turned it off.
Oh yeah.
I was like, don't fucking kill dogs. Like,
Yeah.
don't. I'm not for. It's weird. I guess that's the thing too. Like, there are movies I've seen recently. Like, I didn't realize hanging dead children on the scoreboard was as much of a thing in movies. But once you have kids, you start noticing it a lot. Where they're just like, yeah, kids are gonna die in this movie. You're like, why? Like, why are we doing that? So yeah, I was with you, man. When they threw my kids actually were like uproariously angry at that. But I think he knew instinctively. He's like, they're not going to do that to me.
Yeah.
He's not old enough to have been betrayed by a filmmaker.
Give it time. Give it a couple years, then it'll be fine.
It's straight. I don't know. Do you have cats?
I have 2 cats and 2 dogs.
Would you ever feel that way about a dead cat in a movie? I feel like I've seen dead cats and it doesn't move the needle for me.
It depends on the cat. Generally, like generally any animal, I can't handle it.
Yeah.
I even this is so stupid. This is a dog, but still. Even in Jaws, they don't show anything happen to the dog. It's just implied that Jaws ate the shark.
Yeah.
It makes me cry every time.
Yeah.
They don't even show anything.
Jaws probably ate a dog. You're like, you fucker.
Like the dog's in the water, and then the guy's calling it, and it's not coming back to him. So it's like...
He's eating people's teenage daughters. You're like, well, he's a shark. What do you expect? He eats one dog. Fuck you, shark.
Go ahead. Those kids shouldn't have been in the lagoon anyway. Get them.
You know what's so funny? I wonder if the Meg did that on purpose as an homage to Jaws.
Probably.
In the Meg, they do the same thing where the ducks. I took he was only 4. I don't know why I took him to see the Meg. He's fascinated by giant animal and monster movies, right? Like he loves Godzilla and like anything with a giant. He watched its Anaconda. Loves giant animal movies. And he said the same thing. He's like, "Where's the dog? Where's the dog, Dad? Where's the dog?" I'm like, "Hey, pipe down. It's a theater." But also, I was like, "You fuckers, you fuckers!" Right? Like we've just seen him like mauling Chinese, beachgoers. But like that one little tiny dog, and I was so mad.
Didn't the dog survive in that though?
Yeah,
I thought they showed it pop up
at the end.
later.
They show him come back, and you're just like, "Oh, thank God, Pippin's alive."
You can see everyone else on that boat, but don't touch that dog.
Yeah, you can have the whole wedding party. I don't care. Not the fucking dog.
Totally.
Yeah, that's a weird one. Yeah, that was an emotionally, but that's so strange that it's been a long time since I watched this movie, and the emotional trauma just faded away. I remember it as this kind of fantasy jaunt through this beautiful world, and that's so not the movie that this is.
Yeah. I mean, it's funny because I feel like this one in a lot of ways is very similar to The Neverending Story.
Yes.
Good call. I mean, obviously it's also kind of similar to Labyrinth. There's some similar stuff going on, but in the sense that it's an entire world that is built, like with lots of different creatures and different places and things. But I think that one is so much more. The Neverending Story we remember as being emotionally devastating because it happens with things that we know, like with the horse, with Artex, like we know what horses are. We've experienced horses. So like it's easier for us as kids and even as adults to be like, that is a horribly sad thing. Why did they do that? I hate this movie now.
Yeah, well, and also those are like the only 2 things recognizable from our world are him and that horse.
Exactly.
So you're like, no, he's alone with all these things.
And I think that's probably why they made the Gelflings mostly humanoids, so we could connect with them more on an emotional level. But still, I feel like it made it so it was easier for us to forget.
Yeah.
the traumatic things that happened in this until we watch it again, and then it's like, whoa,
I mean,
that just
there
came.
is a theory about that, right? Is that the more it's like something I read about when you're creating comic books, right, and art. The more hyper detailed it is, the more you're pulling the audience out because you're specifically telling them what's there and who this guy is. Whereas if you do kind of like a more classical, like circular face with not as much detail, it's easier for us to put our own facial details on that character.
Ah,
Right?
yeah.
So the Geflings do become this, and they do that really cool Child's Play thing where like they'll show him running around.
Yeah.
Right?
It's so funny because they'll do that, and I remember specifically the scene when they find the like hidden entrance into
Yeah.
the castle, and you see Jen like running over and like climbing up, and Kira's like, I don't want to go in there, and you hear him say, "Oh no, it's totally fine. We can go in this way," but we're only seeing the back of his head because it's a person in a costume and not a puppet anymore.
He's like, I'm not going to turn around and look at you. I'm watching for danger.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that is this one, I like that about it, right? Because, again, predetermination is a bit of a problem, but it does feel dangerous, this world, right? And more so than Labyrinth, right? Labyrinth feels, there doesn't feel like there's a history in the Labyrinth. It feels like a vanity project for her, right? Even though the world itself, both of these movies do an unbelievable job of making these worlds feel real and lived in. But this one, like you said, this feels like a whole real world with a past and trauma, whereas Labyrinth just feels more about her, right? Like even the people we see, like Hoggle, you're like, Hoggle has seen some shit.
Yeah.
But like we don't worry about that, right? It's not his POV.
And I think it's more this one. It's a more fatal situation.
Oh yeah.
Like, because we know that the Gelflings have been wiped out. We know that, like, we saw Skeksis and a Mystic die and things. So, like, death is very much a part of this world.
Yeah.
Whereas in Labyrinth, as far as we can tell, there's no death. Like, the part with the cleaner in the tunnel is the only thing that hints at death, because, like, if they wouldn't survive that.
But even that one, it's like this terrifying device that as it goes by, it's like a little clown car. They immediately take the danger. Yeah. I mean, there is the looming, hey, there could be a dead infant. Right? No, so they have this looming danger.
It turns into a goblin.
Oh, that's true. He's just going to be part of the party.
So he would just become something else. And like, even when Jareth was threatening Hoggle, he was threatening him by throwing him into the bog of eternal stench. So you're going to be stinky for the rest of your life.
Yeah,
like
the place that we literally see them just walk right through.
Yeah. So this one, the stakes are so much higher.
Yeah.
I think is a big part of why this one is so much more intense.
Yeah, and I mean, it's the hard thing, right? Because this is something you see a lot in like superhero movies now. Is there's this really hard problem of sometimes the stakes get so high that there's no drama. Right? Like at the end of a Superman movie, you can see all of the fucking buildings getting crushed and imagine, wow, there's like millions of dead people in Chicago. Yeah. But we know Superman will prevail, and in the next movie, Metropolis will be rebuilt. Because that movie can't go the other way, right? This movie has that same kind of the world is ending stake, but we spend a lot of time, like you said, kind of just pondering and looking at the actual emotional fallout leading to that event. And the actual event itself, you know, it's more of the world going out with a gasp than a scream. Yeah. It's just this, you know. And I think that's a really cool way to make this movie. I think there's another more Willow-esque version of this movie, right? Where it's a little more swashbuckling and Jin has a sword. And, you know, I don't know, maybe it's the Doctor Who fan in me. I like heroes that don't carry weapons and stuff.
Yeah.
You know, it's very optimistic. I mean, he does use the crystal as a shank, but...
but only when he really needs to.
Yeah. I mean, all he's doing is fixing something. Like, that's his hero journey, is I'm here to repair and fix a wound. I think that's really... I mean, I'm captured by... I understand why this is not as emotionally bonded to my childhood as the others, right? Yeah. It's really fun, but as a young kid, I was more into the sword fighting and stuff, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, like I said, it's something that I appreciate so much more now than I did when I first saw it when I was probably like 5 years old or whatever.
I mean, just the staggering amount of craftsmanship in this movie. Yeah. Like, I mean, when you're old enough and you're really like, into being a cinephile and, you start making your own stuff, like any of us who've ever dabbled in making a video, you look at something like that and it's just like, how the fuck
Yeah.
did they accomplish any of that? Like, I make short films all the time. You're like, I have no fucking clue how someone can be that good at anything that happens in that movie.
Yeah. Which actually, I can plug my fun fact right there.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I meant to mention a fun fact on the labyrinth part, but it actually connects to the Dark Crystal, so it's fine. So Toby, the baby from Labyrinth,
yeah,
his real name is Toby, but he is the son of two of the designers that worked on a bunch of Jim Henson stuff.
Really?
Brian, I don't know if it's Froud or Froud, and Wendy Meidner. And he grew up to become like a fabricator and a designer, and he worked on Age of Resistance.
Really?
Yes.
Oh my God, Toby!
So it's cool to see it come full circle. Like this kid that was
he's an art department goblin now.
So it's and he even I follow him on Instagram.
Yeah.
Because it's cool to see because he'll post pictures of like little sculpts that he did of different little creatures and stuff that could fit
awesome.
in to Labyrinth or the Dark Crystal. And I don't know if he did the full book, but like there's the book that's like the making of the Dark Crystal, Age of Resistance and stuff. And he posted about how before the world ended, he had gone to like a book signing for it.
That's amazing.
And it's just so cool to see that. And I think that is also a testament to how amazing Jim Henson is at world building.
Yeah.
That these people like become part of the family that work on these films, and they're so dedicated to it and they love it that even their kids grow up to do this kind of stuff.
I mean, I think that's the way I remember these movies. Like the only word that describes them to me is just magic,
Oh,
I don't think a lot of movies really, we always hear movie magic, but these really do feel different and imbued with some energy that you just rarely, like I said, I was an Ewok adventure kid. Those movies don't have the magic like these two do.
Yeah.
Like I love those a lot and they mean a lot to me, but they're just not the fucking same. I stumbled across a quote right by Albert Camus or Camus. I can't remember. He wrote The Stranger and a lot of he's a famous writer, but he said, fiction is where we tell lies so we can understand hard truths. Mm-hmm. Right. And that kept flashing in my head as I was watching these movies, right? These are kids' movies that are really taking us on very serious journeys. And as it's rare that kids' movies you can grow with so much, right? That the themes keep shifting and evolving like us, the audience. Mm-hmm. And I mean, I know Labyrinth will never go anywhere. I think it's more iconic and more sunken in than this. But again, I can't imagine a time when people won't want to just sit and be, bathed in what the Dark Crystal's doing.
Yeah. And I think especially now that there's the Netflix show, I think that's not only helping expand the world that it created, but I think that's a really great way to bring in new, younger audiences.
Right.
That maybe they even have seen the movie, but they didn't appreciate it as much. And now it's making them revisit it and kind of rethink what they initially thought about the film the first time they saw it.
Yeah. I mean, that's the cool thing because I know everyone takes shots. Like everyone hates the fucking franchising and the remakes and the reboots and the sequels. But when it's good, it's really good. Like, everyone fucking has their takes on, the Star Wars movies. I know that I've been in the battle, for too long. Like I know all of the wounds we've all suffered. But then something like The Mandalorian comes out and you don't hear that shit anymore.
Yeah. Exactly.
We're all just like, awesome, we love Star Wars again. I think that is the great thing about this era is that these things are still so beloved and have that magic and the allure that hopefully if you get the right people, you can just keep expanding these worlds and keep having fun in them. That's like the bright, optimistic side of, the kind of the world we live in.
Yeah.
All right, guys, that's it for the Dark Crystal. Molly, thanks so much for coming. I actually had a great time doing this.
Yeah, this was awesome. I mean, it helps that we were talking about some of my favorite childhood films, but
that's right. Next time you come, we're gonna get way into some horror stuff. We'll pick some really weird horror movies and just go nuts.
Sounds good.
Yeah, for sure. All right, guys. You can find Molly. Her website is thebloggingbanshee.com. You can find her work on several places, including Fangoria. Molly, would you like to talk about all the places they can find your work, in case I'm forgetting some?
Let's see if I can remember them all. Nightmarish Conjurings, Ghastly Grinning, 1428 Elm. I think it's thecodafilms.com. I always forget because it's different depending on if you're looking at Twitter or not.
Right.
And then Fangoria. I think that's it. Yeah.
Yes. And then her Twitter handle is @bloggingbanshee. I just looked it up to make sure.
Yeah.
So
I'm glad you did because I would have forgotten again.
Yeah. No, really good content. Thank you so much for making time. Means the world to me. Lovely talks about 2 lovely movies. Those were great picks. Great picks.
Thanks.
All right, guys, that's it for our Friday night double feature. Please take a second leaving us a rating and review wherever you find the show, especially Apple Podcasts. That helps out enormously. You can see the faces that make these voices on our YouTube channel, Nerd Alchemist. That's plural with an S at the end. And find us on all your social media. Email the show, filmalchemistpod@gmail.com. We're still in the middle of the Pod is Held Captive month. Really good stuff coming up. Black Snake Moan, a movie called Captivity. Knock Knock with Keanu. Lots of good stuff, so stay tuned, guys. And follow all Molly's stuff. For the Film Alchemist, I'm Josh Griffey. And she's Molly.
Oh, sorry.
I
didn't know you were waiting for me.
Sorry, I forgot. We don't have like a thing yet.